everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of VOX VOMITUS. I am your host, author Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of the Kindle Award-winning novel Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as Pretty Ugly and the Hotel series. Joining me today, as always, is my VOX VOMITUS vixen, Allison Martine, author of The Bourbon Books, which includes the award-winning novel Dibs, Since September, Move on Melinda, and Climb the Salmon Ladder. With us today from jolly old England, right? You're in England? Is Sunyi Dean, here to talk about her brand new release, The BOOKEATERS. Oh, welcome, Sunyi, from almost tomorrow.
Hi, it's good to be here at 11 at night.
Thank you for staying up late to talk to us, because, I mean, you're drinking alcohol. I would be drinking about 4 Red Bulls to try to stay awake that late, so...
I feel like at 11 p.m., though, vodka is almost like a Red Bull. Like, it just gives you just enough. Like, woo!
It's all good.
It needed finishing anyway. There's that much in the bottle, so it's fine.
I love what you just said. It needed finishing. Not like I should finish it, or just like it needed it. You can't just have a little bit in a bottle. My OCD would bother me.
I need to finish that. Well, and I was joking. I took a picture when I was saying Sunyi's going to be joining us, and I had this little picture of ink tea. And here I'm drinking an orange Fanta, which is like as far from ink tea, even on the color wheel, and as classless as possible. I mean, I might as well be drinking Kool-Aid, but it's fine. I'm fine. Everything's good. I'd rather have vodka. So how about that?
Right, this is marmalade vodka. It's what it says. Vodka that you kind of you mature with some marmalade in it. You can make it at home, and I made it because my critique partner Essa Hansen sent me a cocktail book for my birthday, and like loads of them had marmalade vodka as an ingredient, and rather than pay for it, we just made some.
Oh my gosh! Okay, first
that
off,
sounds delicious.
Amazing. And at some point, I need to have a conversation with her about No Effect Gloss and all of that, because she's like sci-fi guru, and I love it. But I feel like that's the official drink of Paddington Bear fans, because it's got marmalade. And I used to get made fun of for wearing my Paddington Bear hat. That's why I no longer wear hats in public, because my friends are like, you can't go to the campus cafeteria with a Paddington Bear hat on. And this
yes,
is
you can. Yes, you can.
Your friends in college, you would have let me wear the hat. I think Sunyi would have let me wear the hat. But my friends would not have let me wear the hat. So.
I'm upset that I don't have one of those hats right now.
I don't have the hat anymore.
Gosh. Well, anyways, this is taking a turn to vodka and Paddington Bear.
There is no Paddington Bear in this book. There is lots of England, which I loved. There is ink tea. There is no vodka, really. I mean, trying to remember, what is Devin drinking?
There's vodka.
He's drinking some hard stuff, but is it vodka? I felt like it was just anything vodka. Cheap and in a paper
she drinks
bag.
vodka at one point. I think so.
She did drink vodka at one point, because I remember I was drinking vodka at one point, and I was like, we're the same. So, Sunyi, thank you for being here. Tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about yourself, and then a little bit, no spoilers, about the BOOKEATERS, which Allison and I finished the other day, each of us, and I think I wanted to actually consume the book.
I know.
And I'm like,
should I eat it? Episode. Don't try to eat the book. It's
oh my gosh, you need to have somebody do an Is It Cake of your book cover, and then have like somebody fabulous. Or 2 fabulous people eat it.
I kind of did a video of it, of like an Is It Cake joke, I think, but it was like a year ago. And then I think my agent did do a video where she actually took a bite out of it.
But it was probably the book, not a cake.
The proper book, yeah. And then she lent it to one of her older kids, and it came back with an extra bite in it as well, which is I thought I was impressed by. So
that is impressive, because we don't have book teeth to do that.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Sunyi Dean. I'm an autistic fantasy writer. I was born in Texas. I grew up in Hong Kong, and I now live in the UK. And I kind of write speculative fiction. And hang on, I'm going to bring this one in.
Bring it in.
She's very sleepy this time of night. So
yes.
She's so confused right now. Like, why am I on camera?
For those of you just listening to the audio, there is a dog on the screen now. So
okay, and at the bottom, as for watching or hearing, Sunyi's website, if you go on it, I love the fact that you can subscribe to her dog letter, which is like a newsletter, but I think it's either written by or features your dog, which I think would probably increase everybody's subscriptions if it outright said, it's just pictures of my dog.
Yeah, it's just pictures of Gwen because I realized I couldn't be arsed to do a real newsletter or put in proper work.
I love that. I love it. I mean, I keep having people ask me why my dog doesn't have his own Instagram account. And I'm like, because if my dog had his own Instagram account, I would have no followers. I'd have like 5 book people, but everybody that follows me, it's like, more Tubby, please.
You don't want to hear about your book. Where's the white dog?
Yeah.
Funnily enough, so I adopted Gwen, and she did actually have more Instagram followers than me when I adopted her. So,
like, I adopted a celebrity. I didn't mean to do that. But I know some people, I see their friends of mine on Twitter who most of their book posts have the dog looking at their book, and I'm going, does the dog read the book? And no one really cares. The important thing is people stop and look because the dog's there, and then subliminally the cover gets in there. So I have no pets. I have 3 children, and I'm wondering if I should trade one of them in for a pet, so that I can do that on Instagram. I don't know.
Or maybe have one of them dress up like a pet.
No, I seriously, I love them, but I don't put their faces on things that I can't control the audience.
Oh.
So I don't have that. And they really would like a dog, so I'm considering maybe just borrowing the neighbor's dog. I don't know.
I have a dog mask I can send you that I'm sure.
Which one of you wants to wear this? Well, my middle went through fox evolution while we were on vacation, and she's a kitsune now. So
you need to get her Animorph books.
She is. Yeah. She loves those, and she has like 5 stuffed foxes as her little companions. So the fact that she wasn't dressed as a fox on her first day in 4th grade, that was like a big win.
Was it a win? I feel like that's the way to start 4th grade.
She picked her own outfit. It was fine. It was all good. It was fine.
So Sunny, tell us a little bit about the BOOKEATERS. Besides Allison and I just saying like, oh, I want to consume this book. I love it.
We will not really eat it because then nobody else can read it. And I already have people who are like, can I have that one when you're done? I'm like, get your own copy. Yes, I'll let you borrow it.
Okay. Can we swear on this?
Oh, yes.
Okay, that's fine. So people who read the BOOKEATERS, people who don't like it would say it's kind of like a big clusterfuck, and then the people who do like it say it's like weird in a good way, and I think they're both right.
It's not a clusterfuck.
It's a clusterfuck.
No, it's first off, I've read clusterfuck. I just finished a clusterfuck. And I think you both messaged me going, what's the book about a clusterfuck of a book? Yours was not, because it was way too well organized. Had this thing called a plot. All the twists were believable, had characters I cared about.
It had a timeline that made sense.
Everything worked there. Like, anybody who is like, this is a clusterfuck, I would like to say, first off, the word is newt orgy. And second,
there's just a lot going on, I guess. And it's called the BOOKEATERS, and it's kind of about their society, but then the bigger story really is more about Devon and her son, and I think that really takes over. And in a way, like the BOOKEATERS, although they're weird, they're almost background, they're almost setting, because to me, they're not really a story. They're like, you can't make a story out of just these people existing. So they're there, and Devon is a BOOKEATER, and she's the main character, but her story is not really about eating books, although it's influenced by that. And it kind of informs everything.
Well, I love it because I'm laughing because you're like, oh, it couldn't be. And I'm going, have you read literary? Because you don't need a plot for that. Sorry, I'm still laughing at that. I'm looking at my rejections going, this is lovely prose. There's no plot here. I'm like, yeah, I knew I forgot something. Yeah. But you have a lot of plot. And yes, the background of the BOOKEATERS as a society. I had no idea what I was getting into when I picked this up, especially because a while back, they had the thing on tour where you got the first little bit and like, oh, this is modern. Oh, I wonder what this is about. And then it's like this juxtaposition of these modern day characters who have this almost secret society that lives in plain view, but just kind of off the grid in various parts of England. And they are BOOKEATERS. And what is a BOOKEATER? Okay, just let's be real literal here. They eat books. It's not a metaphor for something. They eat books. And just starting right at the beginning with, oh, the taste of that, the glossy pages. I loved how different things tasted.
I love there's a moment where somebody's like, if you just add ketchup, I'm like, that solves a lot of problems in food in general.
Just make some ketchup with it. Makes everything better. Yes, it's this background story of this society that's in decline and that doesn't really know what to do with itself, and different factions of the society are trying to figure out how to move forward as the society's in decline. And Devon's at that kind of, what's a good word for it, like
crossroads,
all of
crossroads.
Yeah, crossroads, but really it's the tension point, because she can't just go along and get along, and the main reason is her son. And as someone who has written books about mothers and children and what mothers will do for children, I love that, because we don't see kick-ass moms near enough. Like, moms are always the mean old person controlling their lives and making it thanks a lot, guys. We're either if in YA we're almost always dead, so that's fun. Fairy tales were always because the original mom also dead. Also, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in BOOKEATERS, we did have a little bit of the element of the fairy tale mom, because all of the moms are really only present for, a short period of time and then gone, mysterious.
Devon doesn't know her mother. And she basically is like, she grows up like a YA heroine almost. She has no parents who acknowledge her.
And she lives in like an old crumbling manor house with very little supervision, even though her entire life is very controlled. So yes, she is a YA heroine. Like, all she needed to do was she was a princess.
Sorry, I'm having flashbacks of that cartoon my kids were watching for a while, which made very little sense. Did you guys ever watch that, The Little Princess? It's a little strange. I have a feeling her family could be book eaters too, because I don't really fully understand.
I saw The Little Prince and read The Little Prince.
Very, very,
very different than that.
It's one of those things I'm going, is there some Eastern European Willy Wonka action going here? What kingdom are you people in? I have no idea what's happening, but I loved how, like, Devon is both ancient and modern, and you had two timelines going on, which also I didn't expect going in. So I love that. But then I saw, I think Essa said in her little review that it is dual timelines. I'm like, okay, not a spoiler. That's something. So you're having at present with how she got there, which I really appreciated. So there was the tension in the moment, but then also telling us, and here's how we got here. And this is why things are really fucked up for Devon. Sorry, Devon, things are not looking so good.
But I think British society is very classist, and people here are very aware of it. So I think there's something there as well where, like, on the one hand, like, if you read a lot of Agatha Christie, they're always about these upper class kind of posh people. And then on the other side, you have, like, I guess, Train Spotting, if you've ever seen that, which is like,
this is pretty much what Americans just think of the UK, is either it's a tea party or it's a heroin addict.
Yeah,
that's like the only difference.
It's Downton Abbey
or Train Spotting.
I mean, there is kind of that divide though. Like, there really is, like, there are very posh parts of the UK, and then, like, I live kind of in the inner cities where it's just very, very different from. It's not a tea party and it's not Clara. And I guess I wanted to reflect that a bit, because I've basically always lived in slightly grotty areas of Leeds. So
nice.
No, I love it. I love it, actually. It's not pretentious, and the people are really nice, but
but that's the thing, as Americans, we don't think about. And I know one of my best buddies, she was talking about how she is a writer from the North, and it is not a Game of Thrones reference, despite what people think. Over here, I'm going, I don't even understand what that means, and her having to explain how it's different over there, and that there's just even regional differences that I think we're like, but England's only this big. How can you have regional differences? Because we're a lot more spread out. But that there are those differences, and that there are economic differences, and not just the different accents, which we only know from watching Doctor Who. Mostly that's how we know who Blair's like, oh, Gwen, she's Welsh. All right, that's fine. But I
learned my accents from Mary Poppins. So it's basically a chimney sweep and children. That's it.
And Dick Van Dyke's American, so that doesn't even.
I know. Which is probably why my Cockney accent is terrible when I try to do it.
Well, and if you started in Texas and then went to Hong Kong, what is your accent now? Because that is a really big jump from Texas to then end up. Like, you sound
it's kind of transatlantic, I guess. So I kind of studied accents. This is really weird, but here when I went to university for my master's, I ended up studying at York, and the focus was basically accents and dialects in the UK.
Cool. Very cool.
And the UK has one of the most one of the biggest varieties of accents in that small landmass. it's just very, very odd in that way. But yeah, my accent is all over the place. I did have a Texas accent once, and I think I kind of took it out back and drowned it in a well because it's got a negative. No, it does though, you know, and just it's got such a stigma of like, oh, you got that accent, you must be like unintelligent or something, and I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's terrible because there are people, and we have the issue here where you have politicians where when they're addressing a certain crowd, they put on the thick accent and then they drop it when they go somewhere else. Like, could you just talk how you always talk? Because then it becomes this affectation instead of this thing where they're actually trying to connect with people. It's like a show and it becomes ridiculous. But I don't blame you for maybe wanting to say, maybe this isn't something I want to have as part of
your brand.
That's fair. And my sister, like we were born in Pennsylvania, raised in California, and she now lives in Texas. She does not have an accent, but she's in an area where nobody's from Texas. They're all transplants. So it's like, okay, you probably still sound Californian because you're surrounded by other Californians. And we just sound like Valley Girls. So I have to turn that off when I'm not paying attention. But if anybody noticed that they like too much, that's why.
I mean, British swearing is like amazing. It's like it's really like next level, and it's
an art form. It's like a painting to me. Like I just love it. Like, and every time I watch like a lot of like British television, or we'll just say when I watch The Boys, I find myself elaborately swearing like in the worst way, and
it just doesn't work in an American accent. You just can't do it. So
it's not
fun. You've got to adapt.
Yeah.
I saw a show when I was there in London a million years ago, and they were Irish, but the line was for fuck's sake. And I'm like, that's the best phrase ever. And I would just like to use it all the time. And I can't because I'm not allowed to run going, for fuck's sake. But I liked it so much. That and someone yelling at someone else in the theater door, oh, you rude cow, which I just thought was amazing too. Like rude cow is like the rudest thing ever to call somebody, but it's just calling the cow.
And then cow can also be endearing as well, which is really odd. You can say, like, oh, that poor cow. Or you can say, oh, that poor cow, and that's like, that's not rude. And then like rude cow is really rude. So,
and honestly, cows are just so lovable. I hate that they have this bad rap. It's like, oh, if you call somebody a cow, it's so bad. And like you see a cow, and I'm like, it's just trying to live its best life.
Got its giant eyelashes. Cows are lovely.
Yeah.
But again, that has so nothing to do with your book. I'm trying to like get us back somewhere from where we steered off.
Yeah.
But,
so
you said it was a clusterfuck. This interview might be.
This interview is our interviews. That's what we're known for. Is our
all over the
clusterfuck.
I guess it felt like a clusterfuck writing it, and it has lots of different elements, and it borrows from different genres and stuff. And I think
let's talk about the writing process, because like that's what our show is we talk about the writing process, not about how like, oh, and then this beautiful, amazing book that's going to be a huge hit just popped out of me, fully formed, printed, like, fully formed.
Which is the one who came out as his head like a full. I always get that one wrong. Is it Athena?
Like Athena.
Yes. Athena. Yeah.
My Greek mythology is mostly from Xena Warrior Princess. It's not to be trusted.
Xena is an icon.
Xena
is, but is she historically accurate? Probably not.
I did a tango routine, an Argentine tango routine. I'm sorry, I just have to say this, with a same-sex partner for a competition, and we were dressed like Xena and Gabrielle.
Which one were you? Because you're short.
I was Xena.
But you're short, so how tall was Gabrielle?
She was shorter.
So Xena is cycles, ladies. Xena is cycles.
Yeah, she was little. She was little, but yeah. But and I had the Xena wig already and an outfit.
Of course you did. Do you ever stop and make the ululation? Can you do that?
No.
Oh. I'm not going to. I'll probably blow out my mic if I try. But I love that you did that. But y'all have seen it.
Sunyi, like, what came first? Like, where did this start? Did you come up with the idea of somebody eating a book? Or did you think of like, I want to write a speculative fiction, dark fantasy fairy tale? Did you look up the term book eater on Urban Dictionary and see that it actually means something very different?
Wait, it does? Should I look that up?
I looked it up like a year ago.
I'll look it up later. Somebody, if anybody's
Don't
watching
trust
and knows
Urban
the answer
Dictionary.
to this,
No. So I
in the
had,
comments.
before I knew anything about your book, I saw that you got the deal and I was like, Book Eaters, what a great name. Looked it up. And then I was just like, oh, is that what her book is about? No, it would be fine. It's just somebody who derives, they can only climax when either reading or thinking about books. So that is not what this book is about.
No.
I mean, sexuality is a key element of the book, and I do love the LGBTQ plus rep you have in this, but it's not factoring in literally to the book eater part of it. So guys, get your heads out of your gutters. Especially you, Jen.
I know, me. It's me.
Yeah, so I guess the first bit of it came, I think some of the aesthetic was always there. I remember watching this really obscure cartoon in the 90s called Gargoyles, which has
that's not super obscure. It has all the STNG cast in it. That's where they all went after their show, and I'm like, we're gonna go be gargoyles.
And there's an episode where Merlin the sorcerer eats a book to get into Avalon, and it's such like an amazing image where he eats it to gain its power and stuff. And I think I just always remembered it. There's a manga series called BOOKEATERS. There's a kind of some Japanese yokai who like eat books, and they have like a pet poet that they sponsor, kind of thing, to write them, write them fiction or poetry. But also, I think I remember seeing on Twitter someone saying that, like, oh, vampires are completely done. There's nothing new you can do. You can't make them original. And it just
you said, hold my beer.
Hold my marmalade vodka, please.
You know, we only ever show like Dracula is like kind of one type of European vampire. But there are loads of mythologies, loads of different types of vampire. And it just, I remember thinking like, no, you can do loads of things to them. And it just kind of all came together very slowly. First in a short story about this guy who meets a mysterious woman online, and he's like a poet, and she's obviously a book eater, and it doesn't go well for him.
It doesn't.
But it's a short story, but basically in that version, like when she eats his poetry, she takes away his ability to create writing. And he's just kind of, I don't know, and it changed and it grew. And I think after the first book that I had in submission died horribly in a fiery death, and I was flailing around trying to write the next one, and the epic fantasy that I'd been trying to work on wasn't going anywhere. And I just kept, I don't know, I felt drawn to this one. I thought, oh, you know, it'll draw on fairy tales, which I know a lot about. It'll be fun. It'll have all the pop culture references that I enjoy doing. It could just be a thing. So I just went with it, and it just developed and expanded. And there were a lot of times where I thought, I'm never going to finish this fucking novel because it was
I feel like we've all felt that.
Yeah, it started out with a vibe, not a plot, so it took a while to make the plot work.
That's how we write, because that's exactly it. Is like, I have these feelings. Am I supposed to put words to that?
I know. Like it's just like a weather in a building. Like it doesn't need to be more than that. Maybe like
it has to happen. Can't they just drink coffee and talk?
Yeah, I mean. I feel like I've written several books that are just people drinking whiskey and like wandering around an abandoned house. And I'm like,
use that. That's probably
I need to be able.
I do like that, and therefore I go. I don't see the problem with what I'm doing when there's no plot here.
I know, and then, like my agent reads my book and she's like, so when does the plot start? And I'm like, oh, didn't add one. I'll go back and add one.
I'll admit to being a bit mercenary as well, because, you know, when you watch a book die in submission, it's very disheartening. And I've spent a lot of time reading thrillers, which are the bigger sellers. You know, sci-fi and fantasy have a very small slice of that pie. And looking at what they did, and they really kind of go places, I think, that a lot of fantasy and sci-fi don't, in terms of their focus of the story. They focus on the reader experience over the hero's journey and stuff like that. So it just all came together from those different things. And yeah.
My husband's never going to watch this, so I can just say, first off, I'm really over the hero's journey. I don't need to keep going on over and over again, because after a while, it just feels like a Ferris wheel, and then I start getting nauseous. So we're going to just put that aside. Second of all, the fact that you do have an amazing plot that starts like right at the beginning. There's no slow build up to stuff. I mean, I don't want to spoil even what happens in the first chapter, but you don't waste any time getting into the nitty gritty of what's happening. And then, like I said, with a dual timeline, we can kind of say, okay, well, how did we get here? And okay, what's happening now? And who is she working with? And what is happening? And what is her goal? And is that goal changing? There's a lot of plot for a book that you didn't start out with a plot to. So well done. It did all come together. And if it took longer, so be it. Because I know there are people who expect, especially people who are like on the indie side of things, where they expect you to just kind of birth out a novel every couple weeks as if it's just an essay that you're turning in for, I had to hit 500 words.
Extra credit. Yeah.
And that's not how I could possibly write. And so I know that for me, when things are taking longer, I have to give myself that grace, because I know I've looked at my work when I've just been like, must hit deadline, whether it's real or imagined. And my work's not so good when I do that. So thank you for taking longer on.
No, it's right. Yeah, I think there's no point worrying about things you can't control. And one of the things I can't control is I can't write very fast. So if I can't write fast, then I feel like I should make the time worthwhile, if that makes sense, and just work in. Because it's like, it is legitimate to like write very quickly and produce a lot of novels, but it's just not ever something I can manage. So there was no point worrying about it.
I think there's people who can, and that's their process. And if you gave them longer, they wouldn't necessarily produce a better book. That's just like their process is what it is, and it works for them. But I feel like every author we talk to has a slightly different process. And I've talked to some who are like, yeah, I go through 7 different versions of the book until it's actually done. And I hear that and go, am I doing it wrong? Because mine is basically the version it is, that even the book that I had that also died a very sad death on sub, and then, you know, kind of got kicked in the swamps of eternal sadness and just got left there. It was very similar. The edits were minimal before it went on sub. And then I went and I did an R&R that was considerably less than what a lot of people do when they first sign. So it's like, all right, I guess mine just kind of comes out closer to being done, and if it isn't, it's because it's unsavable. So there's another, but that's just like everybody's process.
Yeah. So I hate drafting. I feel like people tend to either love drafting or love editing. Very few people hate both or love both.
If they hate both, they're in the wrong business.
Then there shouldn't be a writer if they hate both of those.
I hate drafting. So for me, drafting is like I write bullet point almost sketches for a chapter, and then I just edit it over and over until it becomes prose. If I sit down and try, so Essa, my critique partner, you know, when she sits down to write a chapter, she just writes it. It comes out as prose, and I can't do that. I've never been able to do that. So it's just very different, isn't it? So it's so different for every person.
It's funny that you guys are paired together when your processes are so opposite. And I think I also have partners who are like that, where they're the ones who are like me. I'm one track, and I can't move on to something else till I've finished. And when I've tried, I get really screwed up. And then I have the ones who literally send me copies. And if Abigail, if you're watching, this is another new thing. I have no self-control. That's actually how she labels documents she sends me, because she just starts and starts and starts. And she's like, I'm going to finish this one. I'm like, yeah, you need to actually finish one of these books, because she has agent interest in her ideas. So she needs to finish them. But I'm like, how do you even hop between these? And she's just,
I can't do that.
But everybody,
I wish I could, because it would really help when you get to that point, like just when you're writing, when you're like stuck, or you're just like, I've written myself into a corner and it doesn't make any sense. I don't know, Sunyi, if you've ever like done that, where you're like, ooh, this doesn't make any sense, and I don't know if I can save it. I've got to walk away for a little while. That's me. That's how I write. I just write and write and write until I'm like, and it makes no sense. Take a couple weeks off.
If you ignore it, maybe it will fix itself.
Yeah.
Does it edit on its own? Like it just kind of, the last couple chapters just fade away.
I would love that. Can that happen?
No, and I've had that where I'm just like, why isn't this working? This is the wrong chapter. This is not what should happen here. And then I just have to delete the whole scene. And then I'm just like, but then as soon as I'm done, I'm like, oh, this wasn't supposed to happen, and then move on.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to. But Sunyi, tell us about the first book, the one that you said that died horribly on sub. I'm sorry to kick your poor dead horse, because it was a lovely dead horse. Was it a different genre then? Was it more of an epic fantasy, you said?
Okay, so the very first book was not fit for Manor Beast, and no agents liked it. So I think it had in like the region of 130 rejections or something. So that one was like,
which for people listening, that is a normal amount of rejections.
Yes, that's normal. The fact that you got rejections versus being ghosted is even better, but maybe you're counting the being ghosted.
Oh no, I'm counting the ghost. Sorry, just either rejections or no one ever applied. So that one was like epic science fantasy. It had 5 point of views. It was all over the place. It just had too many ideas. I've heard from other writers that sometimes their first book is like not functional, but it has like all their ideas. It's like an ideas pool, and I think that's what happened. So it had all these ideas that just couldn't fit together in a plot. The second one was it was kind of contemporary fantasy. That's the one that found me an agent, and it was fun, but the world building was not working and the plotting wasn't there. And this one, I really tried to concentrate on the world building and the plotting a bit more and kind of pull that together.
Well, you did well.
Yeah,
like, you really created an amazing world.
Like, I think it was a mess, to be honest, but then my editor stepped in. So when it went on submission, I mean, the pitch letter for that novel is so different to the final thing. Like, the pitch letter has this group of people called the Sabbatarians who are not in the final book that's been published. So like we rewrote a full third of that through edits.
Oh boy. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Because you and I were communicating back then before it sold. So was this the book that sold on auction?
Or was it sold on a preempt? It sold on a preempt, yeah. And it sold on auction in the UK side, but it was like a really small auction. Auction makes it sound really exciting, but it was like
it was exciting for us to watch.
It's exciting for us to watch.
Well, because I remember the story gave a lot of us who had books that didn't do well. The first one on sub, it gave us hope because like the first one was, but look how fast the second it was like snap, like it was a fan of snap that you got a deal for this, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's so fast. So that cracks me up then to hear that. Then they had you rewrite a third of it to do all that because I mean I have friends on sub who were like yes and. They didn't like this tiny element, so they're like no. Instead of offering to make changes or have an R&R or something, so that's crazy that they had to change so much of it.
Yeah, I think it's partly editor based. So that particular editor, Lindsay, what I've encountered of her other authors, she seems to take on a lot of project books. So I think she also did Melissa Caruso's, which went on sub as a YA historical fantasy.
And that's the Obsidian Tower. Is that hers?
No. So that is hers, but she's done the Tethered Mage was the one that she went on sub. Okay. And that's the one that Lindsay bought actually. And it came out as an adult secondary world fantasy, having gone on sub as YA historical. So, I think I think some editors like they buy for voice almost. Or concept or vibe, and then they work with you. And then some editors are like, no, I want this oven ready,
Yeah. And that really does vary. And it's funny because I've talked to other authors who I know when I talked to Shelley Parker Chan, her book, She Who Became the Sun, that was pitched as historical. And then they're like, by the way, it's fantasy. And she's like, okay. So she had to go back and add this whole element of fantasy. Yeah. And it's amazing. But I had friends who were like, I was going to it expecting a fantasy and it really felt more like a historical. I'm like, well, here's the thing. This is exactly why. And the fantasy for me, I loved it, but I also wasn't reading it just to get it as a fantasy, if that makes sense. So like expectations, if you're expecting something that's going to be an over-the-top fantasy where it's like, no, this is really grounded and really felt historically accurate to that era rather than some completely like, well, yes, it has a flavor of Chinese history, but everyone's riding around on dragons and like shooting lightning bolts out of their eyeballs or something. I think that's what they kind of thought they were getting into. It's like, no, that's not what
well, I feel like that's what people just like, not everybody, but people, if you say the words fantasy, they think right away swords, dragons, Game of Thrones. And like I'll say like the BOOKEATERS felt very, very grounded in reality. Like because you did create a pitch perfect world that made sense. It's people eating books. For fuck's sake. But I never felt like it was weird. I was like, well, of course they are.
Technically, there's no magic in the book, so it's fantasy, but then it's like not really at the same time. I think it's
science, because you even have some science as like maybe this is why things are the way they are. Like you don't fully give a hey, this is the magical fairy dust reason for things. So you're right, it doesn't have that real fantasy like over the topness to it. Like I don't know. I don't know a better way to put it for people who are like, oh, I don't like fantasy because it doesn't feel real. This feels super fucking real. So
Sometimes too real.
sometimes it's really real.
I was very invested. I had to like my anxiety went a little like bonkers a few times in a good way. In a good way. Like when I'm really into a book and really invested, like I always tell people, I'm like, you want me to be like, should I take a Xanax? No, I'm fine. Like that's how I like to read. Like if I was going to eat a book, it would be a book like that, something that would like get my blood pumping.
But yeah, I mean, I think people have, like Jen said, people have really warped expectations when it comes to what fantasy is, because it is such a huge genre. And so it's not like all fantasy has the same stuff. And this absolutely was fantasy, because as far as I know, and I could be wrong, there are no actual book eaters or any other concepts you present in here. And they were terrifying and beautiful and amazing. So therefore, yes, it's very much a fantasy. But if you're expecting like, there's no Narnia and we're not running around Fillory further. And so the fact that we're running and trying to catch a train to London and how much money do you have on your body right now? Those are real things. And for me, that raises the stakes, because there isn't the whole, well, I'm just going to call my wizard and just solve things. And the eagles take us everywhere. And then I drop the ring in the fire and we're done. That's fine.
Well, you can have no magic fantasy, and that's probably my favorite subgenre. I think a lot of the books I love are like no magic fantasy, but it's a bit niche. I would probably call it speculative fiction. I don't know if you've ever read Claire North books. She writes that kind of thing. They're sort of modern day or historical, but then they're like, there's a fantastical element, basically. And it's that. Yeah,
that's my favorite too. And it's funny because like I say, oh, I write speculative fiction, and then that's not necessarily something people understand, because then you pull the Venn diagram up of what speculative is, and it's a clusterfuck is what that is, because it's all over the place. And horror is considered speculative, and dystopia, and there's all this stuff, and I don't stay in one lane either. So it's hard, because I know what I wrote before was, I'm like, this is science fiction meets fantasy, because I really am like, it's fantasy pretending it knows science. That's what it was.
Hey, that's how I live my life.
I know. I pretend I know science. I'm a scientist. And then because there was a lot of biology in it, and it was accurate biology. And then I just am like, I don't really care anymore. I'm going off the rails. But then it was like, oh, it's literary science fiction. Then we lose that fantasy element. And for me, like, but don't lose the fantasy, because it was fantasy. So it's kind of like how it's the science fantasy, that's a genre that no one ever talks about. And I've never seen an agent list like science fantasy as what they're looking for. But I know there are a lot of us who want to read it. So speculative seems to cover all of these sins. Like,
it covers a lot of things. And I think the term speculative fiction is a lot more palatable for people, because you can say, I write speculative fiction, and then the people who are like, I don't read fantasy or I don't read horror might go, oh, I'll at least pick it up and see that James Rollins called it the debut of a new master of modern fantasy, right on the cover. But people might not pick it up.
Pleasure. I definitely take perverse pleasure in telling people, no, it's definitely fantasy if they've enjoyed it. Because my editor actually said early on, she's like, oh, this is fantasy. People who don't like fantasy, and I was thinking, I kind of don't like those people sometimes. No, because when you get people who are like, oh no, I'm too good for fantasy, it's all shallow and stuff. I think, oh,
and then you just they don't, and that's usually it. And I run into the same thing, and I've had people say, oh, my romances are romances for people who don't like romance, and I'm just thinking, you guys clearly don't. Maybe what you don't like is you don't like cliches, or you don't like.
I think that's the thing, because I know,
and that's exactly it.
I've said, oh, I don't like romance, but I love stories, so it's like. So it's not, it's tropes. And I've been one of those people that's like, I don't really like fantasy. And what I'm really saying is sometimes my attention span is not good enough for like a book that's 1,000 pages and has a bunch of different worlds. And then I'm just confused.
Well, that's true. A lot of people, if you need to have a glossary and a map to even understand first chapter. I mean, I've talked about the rule of 5 before, and I love that. The whole idea of you don't introduce more than like 5 new characters or new ideas per page. And it really should be more than like 2 or 3 pages, because otherwise you overwhelm the reader. And I've read that even like as a beta, where there's like all these names going on, and I'm going, huh? And it doesn't even have to be just strange names, even just 5 different guys. And I'm going, I don't know what's happening here. And I'm I'll go write a chart down. And maybe I just don't have a good enough attention span to follow it. But because if you start with real world based fantasy, like we start with Devin walking in trying to buy some stuff from like a mini mart, basically. I think most of us have experienced that. So we're like right there with you, Devin. What are we buying? Damn it, she got carded. Okay.
And I really loved Devin as a character. I just felt like I really related to her, and I'm not a mom.
And you're not like 6 foot tall. She's really
I'm not
tall.
6 feet tall, but I do wear a lot of black.
You do.
I, probably also would have gone to a bar with Hester.
Yeah, you would.
Like,
Sunyi, are you rather tall? I've never seen you next to something.
No,
I'm
like for scale.
Average. I'm 5'4". I just get fed up sometimes with like books where all the women are like 5 foot and 90 pounds, and it just drives me nuts. It's like I'm kind of probably 150 pounds, and I'm always been built solid, and I just think I could break all these teeny tiny heroines. So sorry, that's really horrible. I should say that.
Like, hello, you little princesses. Let me just snap you like a twig.
I have this kind of persistent like suspicion that if I was 6 foot tall, men would take me more seriously. And I think it would be really cool to be really tall. I don't know.
You're talking to two women who are 5'2".
5'2".
Okay.
And my two writing partners in real life are also 5'2", and we joke that we're 3 owls in a trench coat, that if you stack us up, we're tall enough to be taken seriously, but individually we're just like, we can't reach the things on the top shelf. No. But I like that because it was such a good visual about who she was and her aesthetic and her boots. And I'm like, I want boots like that. My boots have fallen apart.
Yeah. I loved her boots. I loved it when she wasn't wearing shoes too.
Why was she not wearing shoes? Devin still doesn't have shoes. She needs to be wearing shoes for this next scene. Or she will probably be looked at like, why is this woman not wearing shoes? Which is something I think is great because I feel like there are a lot of times when people don't catch details like that. Like, oh, someone left suddenly from someplace and they don't have shoes. It's like, oh, when did they get shoes later on? And a lot of authors just lose that. I know for me, like I'm really big on object permanence. Like where is something left? Yeah. If someone came in holding two things, I know I had to like rewrite a scene at one point because I had a character holding a towel and a bottle of bourbon. And then they were touching somebody. Like they have to put those down first. And then they do that. And then they got to pick them back up again. Otherwise the objects just gone.
They float away.
I'm bothered by things like that. Other people probably don't care, but I'm like, excuse me, where is the towel?
It's on the floor. So Sunyi, before we finish up today, what are you working on now? Are we allowed to ask? Is there going to be a sequel to this?
No, it's fine. You are allowed to ask. So I think Tor had this fear that it would, if they just let it become a series out the gate, that would set the tone for like, I guess, a career, and it would become like Dresden Files, the Devin and Hester edition, every week. No, and I get it, and as well. So they didn't envision it as a series, and I was honestly relieved because I was so tired of working on that book. But I am contractually tied into basically 2 more standalones. At some point, I would like to come back and wrap up loose ends, but that's probably going to be after 2 books have been and gone. Sorry. So the next book is really different. I missed writing a book with humor because the BOOKEATERS is so heavy in places.
It still has humor, but you're right. It's heavy and it's dark and it's
it has less humor than I guess I like. I don't know. I was reading books with a lot of humor this year, like Black Tongue Thief and Kings of the Wild, which are just kind of really funny. I thought they were really funny anyway.
Well, I think humor and fantasy are a rare combination. I don't know if you've read Feral Creatures, Kira Jane Buxton's book.
No.
I mean, I loved it, and the main character is a Cheeto eating crow. So like, that's the tone for you right there, and he's the protagonist. So highly recommend that one if you're looking for fantasy humor. But it's often like, no, we have our swords and we're being very serious here right now.
Yes,
because it's usually like the fate of the world is at stake.
I know, but it doesn't always have to be. And I'm a champion for stories where it's not always like end of the world, because I feel like that's cheap after a while. Like everything can't always be the apocalypse, guys. It's not always the apocalypse.
Sometimes it is inside you.
I was going to say it's still an apocalypse, but it's in here.
Right,
it's in here.
So the next one's the friends we made along the way.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sometimes it is the friends we made along the way. So Sunyi, you're writing something that's
Yeah,
more.
sorry.
more
Sorry, the next one is like
famous?
it's a kind of historical fantasy, and it's set in like 1960s post-war Hong Kong after World War II, and
Oh,
Nice.
it's
cool.
in the walled city, and there's kind of like ghosts and an exorcist who's a really
Yes.
shitty exorcist.
Yes.
So we'll see how that goes because
I want that.
it's fun.
Yeah.
And then,
I would
and then on top of
I
all
would
that,
like to
and it's
eat
funny.
that book.
No, but
It is
like you
more
said, you
lighthearted.
this thing is funny, and then you just gave all that. I'm like, I need to see all that go again.
No, I think often sometimes like Asian literature can be a bit serious, or it has a reputation for being tragic almost. And I think actually Chinese humor is really rad and funny and slapstick, and it can be good. And it's not like a comedy book, but just a little bit of that humor to it.
Like, have some levity. It doesn't all have to be, and
Yes.
we're crying. Go weep for
Yes.
everything. No, you don't have to.
Well, that sounds fantastic. I can't wait. I know it's probably not going to be out for a while, considering the
this comes
BOOKEATERS
out
literally.
now.
It's out now in the UK, like right this second. So, well, we will wait with bated breath for the next book. Sunyi, thank you for being here. Yep, we can chew on this literally and figuratively until the next book is
I'm
out.
gonna pass this on to a friend, and they'll be like, "You were chewing all over."
Like, why are the corners wet?
Good luck getting a UK copy. I think my favorite of the editions is one that I can't even talk about yet, but it'll be in there in September.
Oh,
I think I know a little bit about it because I have a friend, and they're like, "Mine's coming in September." I'm like, "Oh, nice!" So, well, as soon as you get it, read it because I want to talk to you about it. So,
yes.
So thank you, Sunyi, for being here. Thank you, Allison, of course, and everybody who's tuning in live or tuning in on the replay. Make sure to leave us a review on Facebook. It can just be a star or whatever. Just say like how much you love us. We would appreciate that. And we will be back next week, 6 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, with my agent and best-selling author, Paula Mounier, to talk about her book, The Wedding Plot.